So I'd just like to start off a couple. In fact, I was making myself little notes and questions as we went along, and just to tell you how good these two are as speakers, every time I'd write a question down, you answer the bloody thing before the talk had finished. So I almost ran out of questions. But I was clearly, David, if I asked you, do we need to have more of these Botanic Garden things, your answer's sort of yes, because that's what you've been charged to do. But Paul, I was wondering from you particularly, not only do we need more Botanic Gardens, but what's the right place for a Botanic Garden? Where should they be? Where are the gaps?
Do you mean geographically?
Yeah, geographically or in any sense?
Well, we've done some analysis on this, and 80% of the world's Botanic Gardens are in the Northern Hemisphere, and that's largely for historical reasons. Unfortunately, that doesn't coincide with where plant diversity is. So, of course, tropical plant diversity is far more diverse than temperate biodiversity, and that also shows in what we have in our collections. We only have 25% of known tropical species in our collections. So one thing we do need to fix is that divide between tropical and the south, if you like, and north.
I'm wondering too, what about cities and country? There was a fascinating talk at a conference recently, I think you're at too, where someone was talking about closing down a Botanic Garden. I was saying, look, it's in the wrong place. Partly the plants weren't growing, but people weren't coming there. And that's a big, bold decision. It's not one that many gardens make. Once they're there, they're established, they're going to stay there for centuries. Even within cities or a country, do you have sort of sense of where they should be?
Well, I think people, as we know, are moving to cities, and that's where the majority of people are going to be. I think possibly we've just stepped over that majority mark now. And certainly I think we can make a major impact on behavioral change, on influencing people if we are in cities. And I think also I would say that what will become, I think, more apparent over time, particularly in the context of climate change, is that many of these effects will be amplified in cities. We already know about the heat island effect. I live in Wales in the UK, and the phenology difference between my garden out in the countryside in Wales and then Kew, where I spend part of the week, is very noticeable to anybody, really. It's at least a month ahead in Kew because of the heat island effect of being in a city. So I think there's a dual opportunity there. There's the opportunity to engage and hopefully influence a lot of people, but also we're in a prime areas to demonstrate the impacts of not caring for our environment, because I think cities will feel it much more.
And David, where these gardens end up and what they look like, I can see some of them are to do with the big themes you've got. What's the thinking that goes into where you put them?
So, because of the slides doing their own thing, I completely forgot to say the most important thing. So, which is we have a strapline which is "Give us your poison." And which is to say, we want to work on regeneration sites. We feel that actually transforming the land, healing the soil, is where you can have your biggest impact. So everything that you saw there are all on sites where there has been industrial activity, or there are reasons why that land has been polluted by man, because we feel that's how we have the greatest impact. Okay. And there's plenty of them around. There are, and so it's not so much, and the people will come, I guess, as the Cornwall experience. Well, yeah, that's the hope, isn't it? So, I mean, I think interestingly, the business modelling that you do in a city like Qingdao, one of those Chinese cities that most people in Britain had never heard of, despite the fact it's got 8.3 million people there, is very different to a site that you would do somewhere particularly rural or some of the smaller places that we're looking at. Okay, now we're going to send, or I'm not going to send around, we might throw or pass gently a square. This is actually a microphone. This is really great fun. So even if you haven't got a question, pretend you have, and just make a statement.
1, 2, 1, 2. Beautiful.
But we'll give you this to talk. But if you have any question of the two speakers that's come up, please could you put your hand up?
You just hold it like that. Here we go. Ready?
Yeah, there goes one.
Here it comes.
No pressure. Oh, that was a terrible throw.
Thank you. I just was thinking when I was listening to you talk about the Eden Project about marketing, and perhaps that might have been some of the cause that's got us into effective marketing might have been quite a bit of the cause of what's got us to this point in terms of consumerism, and what the role of effective marketing worldwide in terms of persuading people that a simpler life and gardens and nature is maybe has. I mean, we talk a lot about science and gardens and physical infrastructure, but really persuasive language and the marketers of the world, what kind of effect do you think that might have moving forward?
I mean, I think you're right. I think we've all bought into this sort of rampant consumerism, and actually, the reality is that the reality is that governments are bought in the same as big businesses are to convince us that that's the right way to act. And actually, it takes a great deal of strength to not act that way and to go simpler. And I was talking to someone earlier within the group who said we should just ban advertising, which is quite an extreme way of doing it. But actually, when you follow the logic through as to the reason for doing so, then you can see why people might think that. I'm not advocating that, by the way. But I think it is clearly... I think in developing economies as well, you've got to be quite careful because people actually do have aspiration, and we've got to be very careful not to not allow aspiration either within that. So some marketing is going to be good, some of it isn't, I guess is where we end up.
And just to take that a bit, I mean, it's a slightly different thing, but you were talking about social media, and you were not so disparaging, but you were kind of trying to take it somewhere to action. But what part, I think one of the dilemmas or one of the sort of contradictions we sometimes face in Botanic Gardens is we're encouraging people to be away from their screens and out connecting with nature, but someone like myself who loves the screen, I'm looking for ways to connect the two together. I'm just wondering, both of you, your view on where, it's hard to predict, I know, but where we're heading with that medium.
In honesty, Eden has not yet done it very well, apart from getting them some messages out. We've been talking about this a lot because a lot of people are telling us that 18 to 30-year-olds are somehow more connected and more active and more issue-orientated. I'm not so sure that they really are. I think it's really interesting to take the example that actually you can very easily just press like, can't you, on an issue. And that suddenly means that you are for something or you're against it. And the reality of it is that you probably haven't thought about it, and it shouldn't be used as a measure to say that that's actually the way that people want to be looked at.
Yeah, I think it also, what I find, it reinforces you're in a like group of like-minded people and you're all telling each other how much you all agree with the same thing. Paul, do you have any?
Yeah, I think... I agree with both of you, I think, but there are opportunities also through social media. We know that many Botanic Gardens use social media to drive visitation, and certainly amongst the older generation, Facebook, TripAdvisor, those help to drive visitation, which is why so many gardens invest in social media. And we've also got now apps appearing that will take you to plants. I mean, if you have curiosity, then and you have a mobile phone, which most people do. And we're hoping also that will help to bring in the younger people and pique their curiosity.
Now, have we got any other questions? I don't want to hog the stage. Just one over there. We'll get you to the thing. The thing.
See if my throw's better this time.
Oh, look at this.
Well, you're improving.
Hi, I've just got... Ooh, very weird. I've just got a question for Paul. It's just a bit of a cultural question. So I suppose we all know that the culprits or the countries that have created climate change, it's not universal. And I think when a lot of people think about Botanic Gardens and their history, they also think about white colonialism. And so I just want to ask what the ways that Botanic Gardens, with colonial pursuits in their histories, are acknowledging their role in the culture that has created climate change.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And, I went to a conference held at Longwood Garden in the US in Philadelphia a couple of years ago that was actually... it was a conference that was the idea of the Longwood students, so not the idea of the director or the board of Longwood. And the big question was, why is it that Botanic Gardens don't deal with the difficult issues? And those difficult issues in the US, for example, include slavery,